I am super excited to be here. I love Power to Fly. So I'm going to share my screen really quickly. Let's make sure this works. I want to be in slideshow mode. So let's see. All right, great. Yeah, I'm going to talk to you today for a couple minutes about what to do when you don't get your dream job. I have a three-step process for you, and then I have plenty of time for questions, so we can get to any questions that you all have about this topic. And generally, if you have questions, I'm happy to try and answer any questions that you have. So what I'm going to be talking about today is what to do when you don't get your dream job. And what I mean by that is if you're applying for a job internally, you're going for a promotion, a different job at your company, or you're job hunting and you've gotten pretty far along in a job search. So this is if you're someone who's job searching right now, you're applying to lots of jobs. You may be going on lots of interviews. This process isn't for every single thing, right? Like this is going to be a little heavy, but this is really for situations where you've gotten far along, you've met with a bunch of people, you maybe were hoping an offer was coming and it didn't. And these are the steps that I want you to take because that can be really devastating, right? Like job hunting in general is hard. Raising your hand internally is hard. These are things that we got to think through what happens on the other side of that if things don't turn out the way we are hoping. So there's three things that I'm going to have you do. One is asking for feedback, and we're going to talk about how to do that and why to do that. Two, we're going to have you do your own assessment of the situation, and I'll talk to you about what that means. And then three, I'm going to give you hopefully some inspiration to keep raising your hand, because the thing I want more than anything when you're disappointed is not to let that pull you down into a place of despair so that you're not continuing to move forward. So the first and most important thing is to ask for feedback. Now, I'm going to talk about both internal and external situations here because it can be a little bit different, but it's really important to ask for feedback. So with external searches, it can be difficult. Companies often do not want to give candidates that they have passed over feedback for fear of all kinds of bad things happening. So that can be a tricky situation. I believe very strongly that if you got pretty far in a job search process, pretty far in an interview, you had multiple interviews, you met with numerous people, especially if you did some kind of a test or an assessment, they should be willing to give you some feedback. And I think the key to that is how you ask for that feedback. Why didn't I get the job is going to immediately put everybody's back up. Like, oh, this is someone we got to be careful about, right? Like anything that makes it seem like you are um, upset, bitter, feeling some feelings. You may have all those feelings, totally valid, but kind of think about how you want to present yourself as you're asking for that feedback, right? So asking questions that are more forward looking and show that you really are looking for feedback in the process. You really do feel like, hey, I just want to learn from this. I'm like super happy that you even considered me and want to learn from this process so I can use it going forward. So I have some questions on the screen here that just ask it in a better way, right? What could I do over the next 6 to 12 months to increase my chances of getting this kind of role? What specific skills might I focus on developing? Are there other roles that you think might be a better fit for my skills and experiences? So the point is not to ask all of these questions. It's going to be unique to your situation, but kind of think about how to frame asking for that feedback in a way that is going to make people feel a little bit more open. For internal searches, I believe very, 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 very strongly that when you are going for a new job within your company or a promotion within your company, you should expect to get really good, actionable feedback. If you don't, I would actually consider that a pretty big red flag in your situation for that company because they just should be willing to do that for an internal employee. They should be willing to answer all of these questions and more. They should be able to tell you why you didn't get that job. They should be willing to give you a plan of action to move you in the direction if you still want that job, which we'll talk about in a second, right? Like that should be something that you should expect as part of that process. And if you don't get it, and particularly if you're a woman, if you're a woman of color, if you're a person of color, if you're a queer person, like all of these marginalized group, and you kind of get like, well, we just and you don't really get good feedback, that's a real red flag for that organization that they are not willing to develop you. Maybe they just kind of had you in the mix because they felt like they couldn't not, all those kinds of things. Like you really want to get good feedback. Even if the feedback is like, hey, you really just aren't ready for this job and here's the things you would need to do to get ready, but it should be specific and actionable. All right. Second thing we're going to do is we're going to do our own assessment. And there's a couple reasons that I want you to do this. Oh, one last thing I want to say about asking for feedback internally. You should expect it, but you should also make sure to ask for it. One of the ways that you demonstrate to an internal set of stakeholders that you are ready for bigger things or different things is to be proactive about asking for feedback. Like that's a good sign that you're showing that you want that. And again, asking it in a way that shows that you're being proactive and wanting to get good feedback and not feeling bitter and disappointed and all of those other things, even if you are like trying to manage how you ask for that, but ask for it. It's a good sign that you're giving. So, but we also want to do our own assessment, right? So, whether or not we got feedback, especially if we didn't get feedback, we want to give ourselves some feedback. We want to assess how we did through that process. But even if we got feedback, even if we got great feedback, meaning great in terms of being actionable and useful and helpful, we still want to kind of put our own lens on this. What do you think you did well in that process? Where do you think you could have improved? Do you agree with the feedback that you got? Um, you want to be thoughtful about this and kind of process your own emotions and think about whether if you don't agree with something that you heard that you're being a little defensive about it. So you want to be thoughtful about how you metabolize that feedback, let's say. But this is an opportunity for you to assess this company, even if you're there, another company. Like it's an opportunity for you to do a temperature check on yourself, of like what you could have done, what you could do better, what other questions could you have asked, and then assessing that job in the team. Like, is this a company you still want to work for? And that's a good question to ask internally or externally. But specifically, if you were trying to jump to a new company, like this is a great opportunity to think like, is this an organization I'm still interested in? But even more importantly, is this a job I'm still interested in, right? Like I learned a lot, hopefully, through this process. Um, is this still a job I want to go for? Maybe there's things I learned I don't like so much, or that's not the right direction for me. Were there trade-offs in that job that I'm not comfortable with now, or maybe ever, right? Like, what are some things that I want to think about? So really assessing the job, the team. You don't have to make an immediate decision, particularly if you're assessing an internal process and maybe not feeling great about it. Like, you don't have to go jump and do something about that. But it's information, it's data, right? It helps you kind of think about, okay, if I wanted to, is now the time to actually start looking externally? Or are there other jobs at this company that I want to look for? And then the last thing that I want you to do, and I want to like triple like underline this, I want you to keep raising your hand. And I'm going to say this for a couple of reasons. It's really easy to get discouraged. Job hunting is super, super hard. Managing your career, super, super hard. Kind of moving yourself forward in organizations of all sides. So these are hard things. So I don't want you to get so discouraged that you're not continuing to raise your hand. Again, whether that's for internal opportunities, or applying for new jobs. So there's a couple things that I want you to think about. So I do want you to give yourself time to feel your feelings, right? It is absolutely normal and understandable to be disappointed, to be angry, to be frustrated. Companies, particularly when you're applying externally, it can run you through a lot of hoops. I've read, there was a Wall Street Journal article recently about the many, many hoops that job hunters are sometimes asked to jump through. It can be frustrating when the end of those hoops does not, include a prize. And it can be very frustrating internally, particularly if you felt like you presented yourself well and you gained experience and you had maybe champions within the company. It can be very disappointing to not get that job that you were hoping for. So give yourself time to feel your feelings, right? Feel your feelings. If you have a coach or mentors, or a therapist, which I highly recommend as a career tool, metabolize those feelings, process them, get yourself to a better headspace. And then remind yourself that this is one moment, right? This is one little, step along your journey. And then keep raising your hands for new opportunities. Now, one thing I want to underline about this part is like, particularly internally, um, you may think like, well, I raised my hand once and they didn't give it to me. They know I want different jobs, so they can come talk to me, right? Which kind of goes back to the feelings and metabolizing and processing those. But no, they won't. No, you have to keep raising your hand. You have to keep saying, I want a new thing. I want more stuff. I want to do more, right? Now you have to think about how you present yourself. There's all kinds of ways to think about how to do that. And you want to find the line between raising your hand and not being annoying, like all that stuff. But you do have to keep raising your hand for new opportunities. They won't necessarily come to you. And so continuing to raise your hand, and there's different ways to do that. We can talk about kind of managing your boss. I know that's a question a lot of people have when they're looking for internal opportunities. And then if you are job hunting, you may have no choice but to keep going and to keep raising your hand and to keep applying for things. But really, give yourself time, process that disappointment, but keep moving forward. Every step is another step toward what you're going for, right? And it doesn't feel like it in the moment. It doesn't always feel like it in the moment, but it really truly is. Um, I made an analogy with my coach the other day, like the keys are always in the last place you looked because it was the last place you looked, right? The job you ultimately get will be the last one you applied for, more or less. You know what I mean by that, right? Because it's the one, right? And so you never know which of the places that you're applying or which of the jobs that you're going for is going to be the one. But that doesn't mean that all of those things aren't an important part of your process as you move forward and try to figure out what's next for you. So I want to just review these things really quickly, and then I'm going to talk about some ways to connect with me if you would like to, and then I'm going to open up and we can do some questions, which I would love to answer for you. So, the three things to do when you don't get what you think of as a job of your dreams. One, most important, ask for feedback. Ask for feedback from anyone who is involved in the process who you think will be amenable to it. Make sure to do that as part of your process. But do your own assessment as well. Give yourself some feedback about you and your performance and how you did, but also what you think about this company, job, role, team, all of those things, right? And then keep raising your hand. Just keep raising your hand. Good things come when you ask and you ask and you ask. Good things come. Most of us get to a point in our careers where we have heard no way, way more often than we have heard yes. I am certainly someone who has heard no way, 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 way more often than I've heard yes. But the yeses are amazing and they're so sweet. And they don't come on their own. They don't come just out of the blue from nowhere. They come from having asked and asked, and getting a lot of no's and getting a lot of rejection, and continuing to go. And then the yes comes and it's amazing and it's awesome. And I want that for all of you. So some ways to connect with me. I now have a newsletter called How She Does It at Substack. So it's TamiMForman.substack.com. I am pretty much Tami M. Forman anywhere that there is a handle to be had. I just generally get Tami M. Forman every time I sign up for every new thing so that I can get it. So you can generally find me at that handle almost anywhere, almost anywhere. I think I'm on Threads, maybe. I'm on Threads, but I can't remember what my handle is there because that one's so new and weird. But I don't use it a lot. So you can also follow me on Twitter, Tami M. Forman, and I go back and forth with how much. I know we're supposed to call it X. I know. I can't. I just can't. I really can't. Makes like, yeah.
It's not X. You can try it all you want.
Come
It's not
on. Come on.
We call them Sharpies and Kleenex. It's Twitter forever. Get over it. Stop spending marketing money.
Rejected. Yeah.
Yeah, you're wasting your time.
So I'm going to stop my share, but I have sent these slides to the team so they can share them with you all as well. But happy to take questions.
Got some good ones, actually. So one of the first ones we got, this person had wanted to know, how do you handle disappointment and maintain motivation after not getting your dream job? Yeah. I have done this several times, right? It's like the air just goes out of you.
Yeah.
What do you recommend here? Should we take a couple days to, like you said, feel our feelings, or do you have any tips for kind of getting that motivation back?
Yeah, so I think this is one of those, you got to have a dialectical thought process in this one. So like you need to like let yourself be really sad and angry and bitter and all the things you are. Like you can't rush past that part. So you need to just let yourself feel that. And feel discouraged. Let yourself feel like, oh, I don't know if I can do this anymore. It's okay to feel that way. So that's one part. But then you gotta get up again anyway, right? Like there's no substitute. y'all remember the Captain Marvel movie from how many years ago that was, right? Brie Larson. The best part of that movie was when she kept falling down and getting up. Get back up. That's it. So you got to do
I was
both.
crying in the theater. Like,
I totally, me too, with my
yes.
kid. But if you try to rush past that part, if you try to just get yourself back up again, you may actually find yourself falling down because it's like you gotta let yourself have
Like you have
that.
to take stock, right? You
You gotta
crash
let
and you don't
yourself.
immediately go like, I have to get up and get back on the road. You're like, okay, do I
Right,
have any broken bones?
right.
Sweet. Can I get out of
Yeah,
this burning car?
yeah.
Excellent.
And this is where coaches and therapists and friends and mentors and the great people in our life can be so helpful because they can help you process that, and they can also help you recognize when it's time to stop and okay, it's time to move forward. Yeah.
Yeah, good one. Okay, another question from the chat, and y'all keep sending these in.
Yeah,
Absolutely
these are
love, love,
good.
love. I know, right? How often should one revisit their career goals to ensure that they're aligned with their current passions and skills?
That's
That's a
a
good one.
really good question. And I kind of I think it's I mean, I think there's some things that you can kind of review on a regular basis in terms of like, you should have quarterly goals maybe and you may have that as part of your, if you're at a company now, you may have like some goals that you should be assessing and things like that. But I would caution people to not constant like you got to find the right balance for yourself of like, okay, is this the right time to go back and revisit it? You will know if you're really not feeling it, right? Like you kind of will know if you're really just like unhappy. If you're generally happy, you're doing good work, you feel good about the work that you're doing, I would say you don't have to rush to the next thing just because it feels like it's time. um, I'm a big fan of like, we're in the Jewish New Year right now, so it's a great time. September is the perfect New Year. Great time as we go back to school to like look at, hey, where am I? Where do I want to be? So an annual review is good, but that doesn't necessarily mean you have to change something right away.
Yeah.
And you may want to think about what incremental steps are, right? Do I want to take a class? Do I want to get on a new project, things like that. So it doesn't always, revisiting those goals doesn't always have to mean like, oh, I got to go find a new job or get promoted or things like that.
Yeah, I like that. Kind of treat it like a state of the union. How are you feeling about this relationship with your job right now?
Right.
Is it something you're enjoying? Are you in a season where the struggle is real, but you're kind of stuck? Or are you in a season of the struggle is real because you are pursuing the goal that you want? And so there's, some
Yeah.
BS you gotta wade through to get there. Okay, another question from the chat here. Oh, and I wanted to call out, y'all, people are just loving this information. So thank you so much.
Good.
Francis chimed in saying job hunting feels like a full-time job. It absolutely is, whether you're employed or not. It is a full-time
It,
job. It's,
it
you
really
know,
can be. Yeah. It really
yeah.
can be. And managing your time, managing your emotions through that. If you are unemployed and looking, that's one thing, but you still have to like it can be the never ending to-do list. Like don't let it overtake your whole life.
Mhm.
If you're working, finding that balance between the work that you currently do and finding another job, you have to manage your energy and your time in those situations.
Yeah, absolutely. Going back to what you had said to the first question here, Leah chimed in saying, I once jumped through so many hoops to finally land what I thought was my dream job. Turns out it was more like a nightmare. Sometimes not getting the job will mean you're dodging a bullet. And this is an important thing to think about.
100%.
Yeah.
Back in my early career, I was working in media and I was working on like food stuff, which is a very interesting thing to do. I call it my glamour days. Not very glamorous, but
That's
it's fun
glamorous.
sometimes. And I went to an event where I met a woman who was at the time, the editor in chief of Epicurious. So for those of you back in the day, remember epicurious.com? Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I
Yeah.
literally, and I was feeling very bold. I was like, I don't know, in my late 20s, and I walked up to her and I was like, you have my dream job. And she looked me dead in the eye and she said, you should know that your dream job is a nightmare. And I was like,
Listen when people tell you these things.
I did not immediately leave media at that point, but it was definitely a step along the road to leaving that industry and doing other things. So yes, sometimes you know, I'm a God-loving woman, so but whatever it is, whether it's God or the universe or she, whatever it is, there's a reason. Things happen. Things happen.
My brand of choice is flying spaghetti monster, so you're in good company there.
I mean,
Um,
there's something out there. There's something out there,
there's
guys.
something bigger than us. I don't know what it is. I hope it's
Some
carb
guy
based.
knows.
That's all I care about,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. Okay, another audience question. How important is company culture? And would you compromise on your dream job if the culture wasn't a good fit? This is
So,
rough, right? You find your dream job and then the company is kind of a toilet and you're like, I don't like this.
so here's the uncomfortable answer. No
Ooh,
one
I
can
love an uncomfortable answer.
no one can make that choice for you but you. So, you know what? There are people that have amazing jobs that are terrible in terms
Yeah.
of that I might think, right? Like, and I am actually glad I just told that media story because one of the reasons I love media is I looked around and I realized this is terrible and
And like there's no end
I
in
don't like
sight
these
or the,
people, right? I don't want
yeah.
to work with them. But there are things about that are hard. You have to give up something that you maybe really thought you would love and wanted to do. And the trade-off may be, no, I think most people, I believe strongly that people can find a mix of passion and balance. And I think we're headed even more and more in that direction. But that is a trade-off you have to decide which is more important to you. Is it more important to you to have the cool hot job that maybe requires a
Yeah.
lot
Is
of
that going to
hours
bring
or
you, like,
right?
is that going to be the satisfaction that allows you to
Exactly.
be like,
Right.
ignore
Right.
Dave, don't do it, don't rise to the
Right.
bait.
Right.
Yeah.
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 So I wish I could give you the answer, but gotta look inside.
Yeah. What's more important? Okay. Well, another question from Rachel. Rachel says, do you have any advice for early career job searchers right now? I worked for 2 years, then took a few months break, and now I haven't even landed any interviews in the past 4 months, just automated rejections. This is after leveraging my network, tailoring my resume and my cover letter to every application and everything. So let's talk about early career. I graduated into historically one of the worst job markets in forever. It was in 2008. So that was chipper, just the best thing ever.
Yeah.
People that are new to the job force now are dealing with an entirely different set of problems of like what COVID has done to the working world and what that means for entry level job seekers.
Yeah.
What would
So
you tell Rachel?
so what I would tell her is a couple things. The job market is still pretty tight. It's just tight in weird ways. So certain industries, certain sectors are right have more or less slack in them. That said, you need one job. You don't need the millions of jobs that our economy produces. You just need one. I the thing I like to say is if you are applying to jobs and not getting interviews, the problem there's potentially two problems. The problem is probably your resume, but it may just also be like you need to do more networking. So if you're not getting interviews, the problem is your resume, which can include the fact that there's no one sort of pushing your resume forward in any kind of real way. If you get interviews, but then you're not getting offers or not moving forward, then you have to think about your interview skills. But networking, sitting behind your computer and applying all day, it may, it's kind of like forcing your way through on a password. Like eventually it
Yeah.
may work, but it's actually harder. It's more work. And you really just kind of have to put yourself out there and focus on, and even if you're early in your career, you have connections and you have people and you can be, we can do a whole session next time, Meg, on networking. It's one of my favorite topics, but like you just have to like put yourself out there and balance applying for jobs with networking with people. And I wouldn't go so far as to say not to apply for jobs where you don't have a connection, but I would think about that. I would think about how you can focus on finding opportunities where somebody can, give you an insight or push your resume forward versus high volume, but
Yeah.
possibly lower quality.
From all the millions of chats I've sat in on this, check out LinkedIn.
Yep.
Do your best to research people who are in HR or in recruiting within that company. Message them
Yep.
on LinkedIn. Tell them how interested you are. Find the person that has your job at that company, like somebody that's working in that department. Hey, I'm curious
Yep.
about how this all works. Truly, like and you can Google questions, like legit questions to ask them too. You don't have to come up with these on your own. Okay. You don't have to be the person that knows what you need to ask to make these connections.
Yeah.
All right. There's another question. I think this was also going to be an it depends. How do you balance the pursuit of your dream job with the practicality of financial stability? I mean, I've yet to figure out how to live on water and sunshine. So
I
what do
was
you
gonna say
recommend?
this is again about kind of like what's important to you, right? Is it more important to have more financial stability or is it more important to you? Now, as you move forward in your career, you may find that more financial stability comes over time as you move up. There are certain jobs in certain industries, like you're never going to make $1 million as a poet. Like probably not. I mean, there's maybe a few that do, but usually not.
I can think of 3 poets off the top of my head, right?
Yeah, no,
Like,
it's not. It's like that's a choice you got to make, and there may be other ways, and it may be that you pursue passions in a different way, and you work to provide the things you need for your life. Um, most of us can find something that is, both financially rewarding enough for us to live our life and offers some stimulation and purpose and meaning and all of those things. I encourage people to think broadly about purpose and meaning. You do not have to be saving the world. You do not have to be, and you also don't have to be doing something cool and creative and all of that. Like there's many, many ways to contribute. And so, thinking about what's meaningful to you can be broader than just, well, I'm doing
yeah.
this or that. Like you can find that I think is a balance that's in some ways easier to find.
Yeah, I like that. We got a ton more questions in the chat. I'm sorry, Albert, we're not
That's
able to
all
get to.
right. This was great.
Yeah,
It's great being with you all. Meg, thanks again for being the hostess with the mostest.
thank you.
I always appreciate working with you, and thanks to all the folks at Power to Fly. It's been a great hour, a great half hour. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Tami, for joining us.
Okay.